Welcome back. We continue our conversation with Roger Stone. I just want to tie up a couple more things. Let's just be real clear about it. Did you ever have any contact with Julian Assange?
No,
directly?
I've never spoken to him, never met him, never spoke to him on the phone, never Facebook with him, never FaceTimed with him, never Skyped with him, no.
Do you accept the notion that WikiLeaks was attempting to hurt Hillary Clinton more than, that was their driving force, that Julian Assange wanted to hurt Hillary Clinton by releasing the emails that he did?
I think he's a journalist, and when he obtains evidence of corruption and greed and manipulation, he publishes. That's what journalists do.
He did refer to her as a sociopath.
Well, Donald Trump hasn't been running the country for 30 years. Hillary and her husband had been involved in that. So.
All right. And I just want to go, do you accept that the Russians provided that Guccifer was a Russian intelligence operative who provided them?
Absolutely not. We might as well knock that one down. I reject the idea that Assange is a Russian operative.
Or a dupe. How about just a dupe?
No, I think he's a journalist. He does the same thing you do. He gets information from whistleblowers and he publishes it. And did he get his information without knowing it from the Russian intelligence? I don't think we know where he got his information. There was a time in which I believe that Guccifer 2.0, who I reject the idea that he's a Russian, had hacked the DNC and given the information to WikiLeaks. I now believe and I said this under oath to the House committee, I believe there's more forensic evidence that the information may have been downloaded to a portable drive and taken out the back door. But I don't buy the overall premise. When the intelligence agencies, which have been politicized, say we can assess with a higher degree of confidence, I call BS. That's not proof. That's the expression of an opinion.
All right. I mean, should Donald Trump sit down with Robert Mueller?
I think not. I think that's unadvisable. At this point, I don't think there's any evidence of Russian collusion or conspiracy or coordination, but I do think he could conceivably be vulnerable to some kind of process crime, perjury, lying to an FBI agent, and so on.
The president was apparently told that he's the subject of an investigation, not the target of an investigation. I just want to ask you, have you or your lawyers been told that you're either a subject or a target of this investigation?
I have not, and they have not.
Are you willing to sit down with Robert Mueller?
That's a question that we'll get to if he puts in a request. I mean, recognizing that I have 1 million emails that my guess is the government has already rooted through, that's an assessment. I would cooperate with an inquiry, generally speaking, but let's take it as it comes.
You recently responded. You just gave me a copy. This is a copy of a letter that you sent to the Senate Judiciary Committee in response to a letter that Dianne Feinstein, the ranking Democrat on that committee, sent. And basically, you're outlining many of the same things we're talking about here. You acknowledge that lying on this letter would be a problem. It would put you in legal jeopardy if you were to lie in this letter.
Yes, but there's nothing in that letter that is not accurate to my knowledge.
But here's the thing there is one thing that just caught my attention, and I only just got this to sort of go through it, and it's a point that I just wanted to make. Like, one of the questions I asked you was, more recently it has been reported that you spoke with President Trump about the dismissal of FBI Director Comey.
Yes.
And your response in the letter is that the President and I have both denied this has been widely reported in the media. That's what I call a non-denial.
Okay, well, the answer is no, we never discussed it.
But you don't say in the letter, I understand that you tell the media, but you don't tell the committee point blank, I never talked to this president
Welcome
about
to
this.
Gotcha with Jim DeFede. Come on, Jim, let's get serious. The answer is no.
But why not state it clearly? That's a lawyer sentence.
Because I'm going to be going in for an interview, and I'll be happy to state it clearly then. You're nitpicking. Right. I never discussed the matter with the president. All
right. So where do you think Mueller's investigation ends up?
I have no idea. I do think after millions of dollars and these startling revelations about the FBI text messages and emails that reveal the partisanship of this investigation, that he still has no evidence of collusion, conspiracy, or coordination with the Russian state.
Part of me wants to ask you this question. Have you ever watched the TV show Homeland? Because this whole thing is Homeland. I think you would like it, Roger.
I've been told that. I've been told there's a character in there who may be like me. but who could be that well dressed?
Do you know if Steve Bannon is still advising the president?
I don't think so. And in all honesty, my falling out with Sam Nunberg is really based around Bannon. In other words, after Sam was terminated from the Trump campaign, he became virulently anti-Trump and pro-Hillary. And then he became an acolyte of Mr. Bannon. When I called for Bannon to be removed from the White House, picked up by Matt Drudge and others, well, Sam called me at home and told me I was a piece up and that he was going to kick me out.
When was the last time you spoke to the president?
It's been about 6 weeks now. I'm sure his lawyers have told him not to speak to me until all of this is cleared up. But let me just be clear. I never had any advance notice of the content, source, or exact timing of the WikiLeaks disclosures. And, Jim, I never got anything from WikiLeaks or Julian Assange or anyone else, and that includes allegedly hacked emails.
All right, let's take a break here. We'll come back, do another round with Roger Stone when we come back.